Hey guys, welcome to this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday. Now before we begin, if you're new to the channel, these videos are all about answering your health-related questions. So it's very simple. If you have a question concerning your health, something regarding diet, nutrition, Chinese medicine, herbalism, or really anything related to health and wellness, and you would like our help in answering that question, all you have to do is leave your questions in the comment section below, and we'll be answering those based on popularity, the questions that we feel be most beneficial to our whole community, and of course the questions that we are capable of answering. Now, something else wonderful about these videos is that every week from the comment section, we select one lucky person to win a free bag of tonic herbs or medicinal mushrooms. But even if you don't have a health-related question for us this week, but you're interested in winning some free herbs, all you have to do to be entered to win is make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up, and just drop any old comment in the comment section below. And with all that out of the way, let's get to this week's questions. Alright, so getting to our first question, this should be a short one. It reads, you say cholesterol is low if you're hypothyroid. Mine is high, very high, but my temps and pulse is low. What's going on? So I don't know if I just made an error in the last video, but typically cholesterol is going to be high if you're hypothyroidism. Specifically the HDL cholesterol, what is typically considered to be the good cholesterol. And the reason that cholesterol tends to be high when there's low thyroid function is because the thyroid hormone is actually what's responsible for ensuring the proper utilization of cholesterol in the body. So if you're producing cholesterol via the liver naturally, or you're consuming it and it's not being used, meaning it's not being utilized by your body because the thyroid hormone's low, it's obviously just going to accumulate in the body, and this could result in high cholesterol levels when you take a test. Now, another factor that could be going on here is that if it's HDL cholesterol that's higher, it really just depends on what your lab work is specifically. But interestingly enough, despite what many people think or have been told, HDL cholesterol actually tends to rise in response to a toxin or a stressor. So it's considered this healthy cholesterol, but the fact of the matter is HDL cholesterol is typically elevated when there's some sort of toxin or stress in the body. So this could be environmental toxins, and estrogenic toxins can contribute to high cholesterol. It could be from consuming alcohol, toxins from various drugs or medications, dietary toxins that we talk about all the time in the channel. But nevertheless, if your cholesterol levels overall are high, it's actually indicating usually hypothyroidism. So I don't know if I just mixed up my words sometimes in these FAQs because I'm saying so much and talking for such an extended period of time. Sometimes I'll just reverse what I say really quick. So obviously in this case, it makes all the difference, but the fact of the matter is your cholesterol wouldn't be low if you're hypothyroid, it would be higher. And since you're saying that you have a generally low pulse rate and heart rate, those are typically really good indicators of hypothyroidism, especially if they're chronic all the time. So it's just likely that you have hypothyroidism. Most people have hypothyroidism. That's the thing. It's not like this rare condition. Hypothyroidism today is largely estrogen driven and stress driven. As I talk about a lot in the videos, I mentioned how the thyroid and the adrenals have a relationship together, and typically one is functioning when the other is not. So the adrenal glands, I consider them to be sort of like your backup energy reserves. So when your thyroid is not functioning properly and it's slowing down because of stress, because of things like estrogen and other factors, a low sugar diet, starvation, calorie restriction, fasting, whatever it is, whatever's causing the thyroid to slow down, that will turn the adrenal glands on. So the fact of the matter is hypothyroidism is actually really common, and largely because most of us are so stressed. The modern world is incredibly stressful physically, so there's lots of chemical stress, environmental stressors, but also the modern way of life tends to be stressful for people mentally and emotionally. There's a lot of stress that tends to be negatively affecting the body, and any sort of chronic stress will shut down thyroid function and contribute to all these issues. But to answer your question, cholesterol would be high if you have hypothyroid. So that's likely what's going on. And so to remedy it, remember it's the thyroid and the liver. Those are the two major things you want to take care of if the cholesterol. And to remedy it, this comes back to two major things, the thyroid and the liver. High cholesterol or any sort of cholesterol issues tend to just be liver and thyroid issues. So remember, The thyroid is what utilizes the cholesterol in the body, ensures the proper utilization of it and distribution throughout the body. And the liver is what's responsible for first metabolizing or destroying any excess or unused cholesterol. But the liver is also the major detox organ. So if the liver is impaired or sluggish, then that means your body is going to be less capable of detoxifying, meaning that there's going to be a greater accumulation of toxins in your body that could be contributing to the high cholesterol levels. So the two major things you're going to want to do and take a look at is optimizing your thyroid function and liver function. So we have videos here all on the channel. If you haven't watched them, definitely check out our other videos for tips there. But if you want additional information or resources after that point, and if you just want all of the information in one place, or if you still have questions after watching the videos here on the channel, I would definitely check out our healthy weight loss course, which will give you tips on how to optimize thyroid function, how to heal the liver. It gives you a dietary protocol, a couple of PDFs and things you can print out in terms of, what foods to eat, shopping lists, all that stuff. It dives into all of the different things that negatively affect the thyroid and the liver, so you can start to modify not just your diet, but also your lifestyle. And although it is a course for healthy weight loss, the fact of the matter is, these things are all intertwined. Weight issues are usually just metabolic issues, meaning that they're typically thyroid and digestion issues. And again, cholesterol tends to be abnormal, elevated when there's an unhealthy amount of weight in the body, or the accumulation of fat in the body, or just a general sluggish metabolism. So although it's targeted as a weight loss course, it's really just a metabolic course. It'll just help get your metabolism back in good shape, which should correct the cholesterol issues over time. But again, the long-term goal is going to be to improve the function of the liver and the thyroid. So just start looking into the things that you can do to improve the thyroid and the liver. Again, we have tons of resources here that are very, very in-depth and well-researched, and you can also just check out that course. So if you want to check out that course, we link that in the description box below. Otherwise, just search on our YouTube channel, VitaJing Thyroid, VitaJing Liver, and get some tips there. Oh, and I also think we have an entire video or two that talks about cholesterol from this perspective and gives a bunch of tips there. So definitely look for that video also. All right, moving along, our second question reads, have you heard of diffuse hair thinning? If you have, what are your thoughts on reversing it? So yes, I've heard of diffuse hair thinning. When creating the Forever Healthy Hair course, I researched just about every type of hair loss you could imagine. And we get questions from people all the time with all sorts of hair loss. Sometimes hair loss conditions that I haven't previously heard of, and then I'll have to research and look into it. And what I find behind all of them, like I say in these videos so often, is this same underlying pathogenesis, which is usually hormonal imbalance, stress, and inflammation. Now, obviously, there are a couple of differences and some variables that come into place because hair loss does manifest very differently. As you said, there is diffuse thinning, which is generally thinness all over the entire head. And then you have, the classic androgenic or male pattern baldness, which is the horseshoe shaped baldness where just the top thins. Then there's, receding hairlines. There's alopecia where like patches just come out. So there's all different manifestations. And that's largely explained usually by one, the progression of the hair loss. So most hair loss conditions will start out with some sort of diffuse like thinning, especially the male pattern baldness and the androgenic alopecia. Other sorts of alopecia where it's just patches, those are more directly related to inflammatory conditions and autoimmune like conditions. So the degranulation of mast cells, but just more localized, so like localized inflammation. But the thing is that correcting the underlying cause for one of them tends to help all of them. And the reason that they manifest differently for different people might just be where genetics come into place, or there's other factors too that I could get into. I think there's certain psychosomatic factors that are involved there, and a bunch of different other things that are probably not as important as taking a look at just the general underlying imbalances that occur that lead to hair issues overall. So from my understanding and my research, diffuse thinning is actually just the classic like hypothyroid thinning. And it gets called diffuse thinning likely because people go get, checked out for it and they just look at it and observe it. And it's just, again, like a diffuse thinning overall. The hair is generally a lot less fuller than it is typically overall. And they don't check for things like hypothyroidism. In fact, you would probably find that most cases of people with hair loss have some sort of hypothyroidism, or at least had a long history of it at some point in time, even if they started to correct it sometime later. So what I'm saying is, if you've ever seen hypothyroid hair loss, people classify that as a separate category. It's very much just diffuse thinning. And this is because what's happening in diffuse thinning, very similarly to hypothyroid hair loss and what starts the whole pathogenesis of all sorts of hair loss usually, is that when the hypothyroidism sets in, what happens is the hair follicle is not producing enough energy. Remember, the thyroid hormone is what drives all of cellular energy production. It is responsible for oxidative phosphorylation, the production of ATP through glucose oxidation. And as I talk about, the hair follicle is a glucose-dependent organ. So it can't sub in free fatty acids for energy. It's dependent of oxidative phosphorylation, which is again glucose metabolism, oxidizing sugar efficiently to make ATP. And a diabetic is basically the opposite of that. They're typically stuck in chronic glycolysis or even in ketoacidosis, where they can't use sugar as fuel anymore. And this is why they tend to go bald or experience thinning. And that's really all that's happening in hypothyroid hair loss, is that because the thyroid is low, oxidative metabolism becomes suppressed, and that means your body is less efficient at turning sugar into ATP or energy. And again, the hair follicle, being a uniquely glucose-dependent mini organ, is going to suffer, meaning that if all of a sudden your metabolism is generally slowed down and your hair follicle is not getting enough energy, not oxidizing enough glucose, then it's going to be less resilient. So just imagine what happened to you overall, your body, if you couldn't digest or metabolize your food. You'd become smaller, right? You'd start to shrink down, you'd lose a bunch of weight, you'd become less resilient, less vigorous, maybe physically smaller, you'd start to waste muscle and lose fat. Your overall appearance would start to just become smaller, you'd shrink, you'd be weaker. And this is generally what's happening to the hair. The hair in diffuse thinning is becoming thinner all over, less vibrant, less lustrous, because it's not being fed properly. And this is, again, largely due to the downregulation of the thyroid from what I see. So the way I see diffuse thinning is it's pretty much the closest thing to hypothyroid hair loss. They're probably one and the same. Again, they probably just have different labeling, because somebody that goes to the doctor because their hair is thinning all over, they go, doctor, what's going on? They just look at the hair and go, oh, well, it's diffuse thinning. But rarely does a clinical physician, a Western medical doctor, take a look at a specific isolated issue and try to tie in the whole big picture. They probably not looking at it and go, oh, well, it's, your thyroid's probably not working. So to answer your question, diffuse thinning is really just the typical hypothyroidism in disguise. So it's really just all of the same things that are occurring in hypothyroidism, and it's just affecting the hair at this point. And what you would probably find is that if it stayed chronic enough, it would get worse and worse and worse, and it might be considered something else later on down the road. Now, if you're a female, diffuse thinning is more common because females don't tend to have calcium receptors in their scalps. This is usually why men become like slick, shiny, bald, as opposed to women. It has nothing to do with DHT necessarily. DHT and androgens might play a role, but it's usually underlying excess estrogen that causes the increased production of androgens anyway to buffer the estrogen. So my point is that in men, the reason that they become slick bald is because those calcium receptors, and the calcium accumulates in the scalp, leading to fibrosis and scalp calcification. But it starts off usually very similar. It starts off as a diffuse sort of thinning. The hair is just becoming starved of energy. It starts to fall out a little bit. It becomes a little bit thinner and thinner over time because it's ultimately malnourished. And then, insets oxidative stress and inflammation, and this can lead to baldness. So what I'm just trying to say is that although that male pattern baldness looks very different from diffuse thinning, male pattern baldness probably initially started off as something that looked very much like diffuse thinning, just going to show that the underlying causative factors are more or less one and the same. So what I would recommend overall is definitely checking out our Forever Healthy Hair course if you haven't yet. Super popular amongst our subscribers here, and I honestly think it's one of the best things that you could ever do if you're experiencing hair loss. The hair loss industry is completely bogus. One of the major reasons I made that course is because so many people have this issue on our channel and ask about it, but the research that's available to the public is so skewed and manipulated by funded research and just completely inaccurate. And the worst part about it is that the common remedy sold for all sorts of hair loss, particularly in men, are DHT blockers. And DHT is not the cause of hair loss. DHT is an essential sex steroid for good metabolic function that tends to decline with age. And by blocking it just to try to save your hair, first of all, that's not going to help. Second of all, what it's going to do is going to lead to infertility issues, gynecomastia, the general slowing of the metabolism. It can do some serious long-term damage. So I think the conventional hair loss industry is incredibly unethical, even if they're not intending to do that. But by choosing to stay ignorant to the true physiological nature of hair loss, I think it is unethical to, be selling people these, drugs that are just coming with crazy side effects and not even helping people. They're not even effective. So that course is rooted in sound physiological research, the true causes of hair loss that are known, that are just deep in medical literature. They're hidden out of the general public because, it would interfere with the whole hair loss industry and their profits. So, the truth is that we know what causes hair loss. It is very much caused by hormonal imbalances that have nothing to do with androgens, but an excess of stress hormones like cortisol, estrogen, and prolactin. It has everything to do with the thyroid not working properly, and it's generally stress-driven. And why is this generally hidden from the public? Well, because this pulls up into people's awareness that they're really stressed out. Maybe their diets are not optimal, which has people start questioning their food sources. It has people question a lot of things. So it starts off as hair loss, but when you start learning the true causes of it and you peel back a couple of layers, you're faced with the fact that the modern world is very stressful. Our food, the foods that are sold to us in the grocery store, most foods today, they're generally toxic and they do a lot of damage to our bodies. They can contribute to hair loss if you're consuming the wrong ones. The things we buy at markets to clean our houses and stuff, all this stuff is generally toxic. So I think that's one of the major reasons this information is, tightly hidden in the medical journals to not stir up and cause a bunch of problems and confusion for people or chaos even. But the fact of the matter is we do know what causes hair loss, and it's directly related to the elevation of stress hormones ultimately. And there are simple things you can do to remedy it that don't require any sort of medications or drugs or DHT blockers, etc. You can remedy it very simply. The only challenge is the hair takes a long time to grow. So, depending on the progression of it, it might take a year or two to see full restoration or near complete restoration. But if you just have diffuse thinning, you might see incredible results in a short period of time. So I would definitely recommend getting that course, especially if you're struggling with this issue and you're spending money on supplements and all this other stuff that might not even be helping it and even making it worse. It will truly give you a clear picture as to what to do from this point, and you won't have to waste your time and money on gimmick supplements and diet fads that aren't even working. So I definitely can tell you it will at least do that for you and give you a clear vision of what to do. Otherwise, we do have tons of videos here on the channel. You could get a pretty good idea as to what's going on and what to do by watching all of our videos on the YouTube channel related to hair loss. It might be a little bit more sporadic, and at the end of it, you might just have to do a little bit of your own thinking as to how to put together a protocol, I guess. But you could get a really good idea as to what's going on just by watching these other videos. So definitely watch all the other videos we have on the YouTube channel regarding hair loss. And if you want, again, a step-by-step program, something clear and concise, all in one place, then definitely check out the Forever Healthy Hair course. But to give you some tips here now, I'll just tell you right now that diffuse thinning is really just the hypothyroid hair loss. Ultimately, what's happening is your hair follicles overall are not getting adequate energy. And the hair follicle requires glucose. It cannot sub in fatty acids or alternative fuel sources for energy. It is dependent of glucose metabolism, which is governed by the thyroid. So it's likely that hypothyroidism is occurring. So you want to take a look at the thyroid. You want to make sure that the estrogen levels are in check, lower the cortisol, lower the prolactin, watch our videos on thyroid function, and go from there. It'll obviously be a journey. There's a couple of different things you're gonna want to learn, and there's a lot of different things that can help. But I would just generally recommend starting off with watching our other videos, checking out the Forever Healthy Hair course, And if you have any specific questions beyond that point, just feel free to email us. That brings this week's FAQ and Freebie Friday to a close. So if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Remember, if you're interested in winning some free herbs or you'd like your questions answered, all you have to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel, give this video a thumbs up again, and just drop a comment or question in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.